Hello everyone, I am Siddharthan. Currently we are in the first module of our deep learning course, and this first module is about the basics of deep learning. In the previous video we have discussed what is meant by a perceptron and what is the importance of a perceptron when it comes to deep learning. In this video let's try to dive a bit deeper and understand a mathematical formulation of a perceptron with some examples. So let's get started. These are all the topics that we will be discussing today. First, let's do a review of whatever we have discussed so far regarding perceptron. And next, let's take an example with some numbers and let's try to calculate, how a perceptron would do the calculation to get the output. And then let's try to understand how this training happens. So let's say we are using this perceptron as a standalone model. So in that case, how the training happens with this epochs, learning rate, gradient descent, and so on. And once that is done, let's try to understand what are all the limitations of a perceptron. Okay, so let's get started. So this we have seen in the last video. A perceptron is a basic artificial neuron that takes inputs, applies weight, and combines them. Later it produces an output using an activation function. It is used for tasks like binary classification, and it is a building block of neural network. So we have discussed this in detail in the previous video, as I said. So in a neural network we have several independent like neurons, right? So you have an input layer, you have several hidden layers, and you have an output layer, and each layer will have like several neurons in it, and each of these individual neurons is what we call as a perceptron. And then you can also use this perceptron as a standalone machine learning model. So this is what it's about. Okay, so to understand this neural networks better, it would be better for us to understand this perceptron first, and this is like the idea of doing this particular video. So the factors involving a perceptron includes the input parameters, and we have the weights, which basically gives you the weightage of those input parameters, and you have a bias term. So once you have all these values, you would find the weighted sum and then apply the activation function to this weighted sum, and you would get this output, right? So we have x1, x2, and x3, which are our input features, and w1 is the weight of input feature x1, which is nothing but the weightage of x1, and then you have w2, which is the weightage of x2, and so on. To this you add a bias value, and when we say summation, it's nothing but it's the product of your input feature and the weight. So you would do x1 into w1 plus x2 into w2, and to that you also add x3 into w3. After that you add bias term to that, so it can be some number, and after that you apply this activation function and you would get this output. So this we have discussed already, and this is how you can represent the parameters involved in it. So you can have an input vector like this x1 x2 until xn. So the number of weights is also equal to the number of input features you have, which is nothing but the weightage of those input features, and then you have like single bias term. So this is that formula of multiplying the weight to its input feature and adding the bias term. To this we would apply a activation function, and we have also discussed few of the activation functions that we have. So we have sigmoid, where the output of the sigmoid function will be a value between 0 and 1. So this is just similar to your logistic regression model, because logistic regression also uses a sigmoid function. This is the formula, which is 1 divided by 1 plus e power minus z, right? So the value is between 0 and 1. And then you have a step function where it gives you a binary output as either 0 or 1 when it reaches a particular threshold. So in this case the threshold is 0 if the z is nothing but the summation that we are calculating here. Okay, the product of weights and input feature plus your bias. So when that product is like greater or equal to 0, right? So when you have this weighted sum is greater than or equal to 0, you take the output value as 1. If not, if the weighted sum is a negative number, you would take the output value as 0. So this output value is what comes out of this activation function. You can see this representation. So we are sending an input and we have some activation function. So it can be a sigmoid activation, it can be a step, sine, or a ReLU activation function, and from that you will get an output. So this output is what we have here. Okay, and then we have a sine function, which is similar to the step function. In the step function you would have 0 and 1, and in the sine function you have -1 and +1 based on the sign of the input. So if the value is greater than or equal to 0, the output will be 1. If the value is a negative number, if the weighted sum is a negative number, you would get -1. And then you have ReLU, which is the most widely used activation function, where the output is the input value if it is a positive number, else 0. So basically what it says is max of 0 comma z. Now let's say the weighted sum is -10. In that case the output that you would get from this activation function would be 0. If the weighted sum that you get is -50, in that case also you will get an output of 0. But let's say the output is a positive number, then in that case the output is that same positive number. Okay, if the weighted sum is 100, you would get the output as 100 as well. So we would like represent the ReLU activation function as something like this. So the graph would look like something like this, where this is 0. Okay, so this is 0, and like you can think about this x-axis as your weighted sum. Okay, and these are my negative values, so let me put this as negative. So when your weighted sum is negative, it's always going to be 0. If that weighted sum is a positive number, then whatever number it is, you will get that as output. If the weighted sum is 150, you would get 150 as the output. If the weighted sum is 1000, you would get output as 1000. For negative numbers, it's always going to be 0. So this is what we call as ReLU activation function, and as I said, it is like widely used. And you also have something called as leaky ReLU, which kind of solves some other issue that we would get in a ReLU, but we will discuss that in a later time. So far we have discussed all these things in the previous video. Now what we can do is take an example, do the calculation for ourselves, and see how a perceptron would work. Okay, so let's take an example and let's use a sigmoid perceptron or a sigmoid neuron, where the activation function that we are going to use is a sigmoid function. So yeah, this is the perceptron with sigmoid activation function, and let's say we have three input features. The value of x1 is 0.2, value of x2 is 0.4, and value of x3 is 0.6. And then you have the weight value. Weight value is nothing but the weightage of this input features. X1, the weightage of x1 is w1, weightage of x2 is w2, and the weightage of x3 is w3. So 0.1, 0.5, and 0.3 respectively. And you have a single bias term. Let's say the value is minus 0.2. Again, there is no reason why I chose this numbers. This is just an example. So it can be like any numbers that we would get from this data set. So basically we would have a data set, and this data comes from there, right? So you can think about a diabetes prediction data set where x1 can be the age of the person, and x2 can be the blood pressure of the person, x3 can be the gender of the person or something. So it can be any data. And now we have the formula, right? So this is that weighted sum part. So a perceptron has two kind of factors associated to it. One is your weighted sum, and the other operation it should do is applying this activation function, and this is the formula for our weighted sum. So we take the product of weight and input feature. So we multiply this x1 with w1, x2 with w2, and x3 with w3. Later we add the bias term, and this is the output that we would get after applying this activation function, right? And in this case, as I said, this is a sigmoid activation function this perceptron has, and so the formula is 1 divided by 1 plus e power minus z. So if you just substitute the values here, the sum would be 0.1 into 0.2. I'm just like substituting the values here. So you have 0.1 that comes from this w1, and 0.2 that comes from this 0.2. So just the same. So once you add once you find the product of this, you would add the bias term. So in this case, the bias term is 0.2, so that's why we have this like 0.2 here. So once you find the sum of this product, you would add that bias term later. So this is what you would have, and the final z value you would get is 0.2. And now we have to apply the sigmoid function to this z value. And when you do that, it would be 1 divided by 1 plus e power minus 0.2, and we would get like something like this. So the output would be 0.5498. Okay, so this is why I said that if you use a sigmoid activation function, your output will always be between 0 and 1. Okay, in this case we get 0.2 as the value, and here the output we got is 0.5498. You can also try with z value of 1000 or 1500 or any number. It can be a large positive number, or it can even be a large negative number. No matter what the value is, you will always get the value between 0 and 1 because of the formula that we have. So you can like try this with different set of values. Okay, so this is how the calculation occurs. But what about this weight value and bias value? So here we have just taken like some random weight value and bias value, but we know that in machine learning there is a step called optimization that occurs. So when the model training happens, so you might have worked on using a machine learning model to train a particular data set. So you would do this model.fit, and you pass this x train and y train, right? So what happens is there first we kind of initiate the weights. So we give like 0 as the weight value for all these weights, and 0 as the value for bias, or it can also be any random values. Now it would take that weight value, and it like does all these calculation, and it checks whether this matches with the true output, which is your y train. If it not matches, it will try to change the weights, it will try to alter the weights so that it can make like a better prediction. So that's what the optimization is. Optimization is nothing but it kind of tries to update the weights in each step so that you have a more accurate result. So this we have again already discussed a lot when we have discussed about this gradient descent and optimization. I'll also give a link of this gradient descent video I uploaded like long back. You can go through it to get a very detailed understanding of it. Okay, so I'm assuming that you are clear with that, so I'm just giving you a very high level overview. So this is how it would work. So let's say that we are using gradient descent, which is again an optimization algorithm. So let's say that we have the loss function in the y-axis and you have the weight in the x-axis. Now we would start with some random initial weight value. So this weight value can be 0 or it can be like some initial random value, as I said. So at each step we would change the weight value so that it reaches this global minimum. So this global minimum is the point where if you choose this particular weight value, let's say the weight value here is 0.8. So when you choose weight value as 0.8, you are getting like more accurate results, or like the results that are closer to the true label. So this is what we get global minimum, where we would get like the most accuracy. So we try to keep on changing these weights so that we would reach this global minimum. So this is the idea of optimization, the idea of gradient descent. And this y-axis is nothing but the loss function, and loss function is the difference between your predicted value and your true value. So that is your loss function. So at each step we change the weight and we try to see what's the loss function is. So loss function, you can just think about it as an error. So we always try to minimize this error or minimize this loss function so that you are getting like better results. So at each step we try to see whether the loss is decreasing or not, until a point where you reach this global minimum. So this is the idea of gradient descent. And if you use a perceptron as a standalone ML model, so actually you have that in sklearn as well. So we know that we have used logistic regression, random forest, XGBoost, etc. I mean, yeah, XGBoost would be in a different library, but we have used random forest logistic regression from sklearn. Sklearn also has perceptron as a model, which I mean you can try, right? But it actually uses stochastic gradient descent. So this is like a normal gradient descent that we are talking about, but stochastic gradient descent is like a bit different. I mean, the approach is similar, but the difference is that here we have loss function, right? So when it is like a standard gradient descent, as we have mentioned here, this would actually be cost function. Cost function is when you have a weight value and bias value and do the prediction for all the data points that you have. Let's say you have like 100 data points in your data and you're like randomly initiating this weight value and doing the prediction, and you would have some prediction, and now you would compare it with the true value that you have, and now you get some errors, right? So when you take all those data points, do this difference and do these steps, that's called as like the normal gradient descent we would work. But stochastic gradient descent kind of takes a smaller subset, so it can also take like each individual data points. So let's say we have 100 data points in the normal gradient descent, we would like take all those 100 data points, make the prediction, find the cost function, which is the summation of all the loss function that we would get, or basically the sum of all the errors that we are getting. Now after that you change the weight value and then like keep on doing the same thing. But in the case of stochastic gradient descent, what you can do is you can take a single data point and take a weight value and find the loss function. So let's say that the loss value is more. Now what you do is you update the weights and you take like another data point, again do the same, and again you can update the weight. So it's not like you are predicting and finding the error value for all the data points, you can also do it for like as small as like one data point. So you just have like a smaller number of data set or smaller number of sample on which you can like do this change. So this may be a bit tricky to understand, but it's okay because we will like discuss in detail about this. Just like understand that perceptron we can also use this stochastic gradient descent, which is a bit different from gradient descent that we are kind of used to. So the main idea here is to reach this global minimum where the error that you are making from the model is a bit less. Okay, And this is how we could represent this when we are doing this for both weight and bias value. Let's say we have this weight in one axis, bias in other axis, and you have the loss function or the cost function in other axis. So we would try to reach this global minimum. So you keep on changing this weight value and bias value and see where is that global minimum is, and then you would choose that weight value and bias value. So this is how the training happens. And yeah, this is the formula. So gradient descent is an optimization algorithm used for minimizing the loss function in various machine learning algorithms. So it is used for updating the parameters of the learning model. So the parameters is nothing but our weight value and bias value. So this is the formula to update it. So this is like the updated weight, and this is the previous weight. So updated weight is equal to previous weight minus L into dw. L is nothing but your learning rate. So how much change you want to give it to your parameter. Let's say that we are changing this weight value from this value to this value. Let's say we are changing it by a factor of 0.2. So you start with a weight value of, let's say, 0.5, and the learning rate is 0.2. So next step you would take the weight value as 0.7, because you have added like 0.2 to it. So at each step you would add like 0.2 to this. So this is what like learning rate is, right? So that is what this L means, and this dw is nothing but the partial derivative of loss function with respect to w, and this db is nothing but the partial derivative of loss function with respect to b. So this is nothing but, this is to see how much your loss function changes when your weight changes. So because at each step we are trying to change the weight and see whether the loss is like getting reduced or not, right? So this piece of the formula is for that purpose. So if you need a very detailed explanation of this, as I said, I'll give the link for this gradient descent video in the description. You can like look into this, okay? But this is like the overall idea. So you would have the input features, you would have the weights, and you also have a bias value. You apply this summation and you have the activation function, and this would give the output. The only thing about this optimization is to find this weight value and a proper weight value, or the most optimum weight value, we would use that gradient descent and see whether we could reduce the errors that it is causing. So that is the working of a perceptron. Let's try to discuss the limitation of a perceptron. Okay, so this is fairly a simple model, so it tends to have its limitation. First is linear separability. So we are kind of using the activation functions like sigmoid, which is also kind of a linear based function. So perceptron will only work well when you have a data that is like linearly separable. So linearly separable means if you put the data in x and y axis, you should be able to separate the data by a straight line. If you can separate it by a curve or something, in that case perceptron may not work. So that's the thing. So you have linear separability. And then you have binary classification. So perceptron can be used only for binary classification. So that is like other thing, because we have also seen some activation functions like step and sign, right? So they will also be able to give you binary output as 0 or 1 or -1 and +1. So it's only good for binary classification. And sigmoid also is good for binary classification only, as we would use that in logistic regression. If the output value is greater than 0.5, we would say that the class is 1. If the output value is less than 0.5, we would say the class is 0. So it's only good for a binary classification problem. So lack of complexity, right? So this is just a fairly simple model, which not like as deep as a neural network. So in a neural network you have several perceptrons, you have several layers, so it can capture like non-linear relationship, non-linear patterns, but a perceptron can't do it. So that is like one limitation. And lack of generalization. So if you have several input features, the model may tend to overfit, so it cannot like have a generalized you know learning thing. So there is a chance for this model to overfit. So that's one thing. And sensitivity to initial weights. Now you would initiate some weights, right? So that is like a critical step. If that weight has not been initiated properly, then again there is like some kind of a bias that goes to the model, that it can't update the weights properly, so you don't have the best model that you have. So these are some of the limitations of a perceptron. So the reason we are discussing this is all these limitations can be kind of dealt with when we use a deep learning, because in deep learning, as I said, we have several layers, we have like several perceptron which would be able to handle like a complex pattern that the data could present us, right? But these are the limitations when we consider perceptron as a standalone machine learning model. Okay, so this is the concept of perceptron. Like how all this would come into deep learning is this single perceptron, or you can call this as neuron. So we would have this several neurons in our input layer, we would have like several neurons in the hidden layers and even the output layer, and we would like build a better model which is nothing but our neural network. Okay, so I hope everyone is clear until this part about perceptron. In the next video, let's try to build this perceptron from scratch in Python so that we could get like a more practical understanding of this. So once that's done, we can like move on to topics like activation function, propagation, etc. Okay, so that's it from my side for this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.